Mr. Chair, we're now live.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. This meeting of the General Government Committee is being held electronically and live streamed on the internet. Due to the COVID-19 emergency and requirements for physical distancing, no in-person attendance is permitted at this meeting. All regular practices and procedures of the committee continue to apply during this electronic meeting. If we encounter any technical difficulties, we may take a brief recess while they are resolved. Thank you for your patience, and we'll now proceed with the meeting. Good afternoon again. I am now calling this meeting to order. First, are there any disclosures of pecuniary interests? I see none. Okay, we are now going to move on to the adoption of minutes. We have the minutes of the regular meeting of April 12, 2020. Are there any questions on these minutes? Yes, I see there's a question. Please proceed, Councillor Crawford.
Sorry, Chair, I was just going to move them.
Oh, okay. I still have more to go through, but yes. Oh, thank you. All right. So mover for the regular minutes for the meeting of April 12th would be Regional Councillor Crawford. All those in favor? Any opposed? I see none. This motion carries. Second, we have the minutes of the closed session of April 12, 2020. Are there any questions on the minutes of the closed session? I see none. Do I get a mover to approve this? Councillor Bauer. All those in favor? None opposed. This motion carries as well. Moving on to the consent agenda. The following items have been pulled for discussion. 4.1, 4.2, and 4.3 by Mayor Collier, and then 4.5 and 4.7 also by Mayor Collier. Are there any other items that members wish to pull for discussion? Seeing none, can I get a motion to approve the balance of the consent agenda? Regional Councillor Lee, all those in favor? All in favor, none opposed. This motion carries. We will now move on to item 4.1 of the consent agenda by Mayor Collier. Mayor Collier, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to staff. Just find the page here. Page 13 of the report, or 13 of the agenda, sorry, page 1 of the policy. Item 3.2, council members may reallocate their budget spending amount between expenses and categories. I guess I wonder if there's any limit on that. I mean, if a member of council doesn't incur any website hosting, for instance, or any marketing or any promotion or any other expenses, I guess the way this reads, they could reallocate the entire amount to the clothing budget. Is it that open?
Through the chair, yes, it's pretty standard that there be allowed or permitted to reallocate their budgets. It's just pretty standard and a tradition that we've held. So whether that's spent on clothing or promotional or web or marketing of events in their areas, that it's completely up to the member to decide.
Okay.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that was included in the previous policy as well.
Right. I just want to, I thought that the, for the clothing budget, I thought it was $50, but for instance, in this case, it could be much higher. I don't remember how much the actual budget allocations are, right? Do you know what that is off the top of your head, Ms. McClarty?
I believe that there is a reference to clothing in here.
I didn't see an amount.
An amount. Okay, so typically there is an amount that's given to staff in terms of how much is available to spend, but I don't believe that there is an amount for a member. I would have to ask the treasurer to respond to that.
Good afternoon. I'm just trying to look it up. I don't have that information directly in front of me through the chair to the mayor. But to answer your question as well, it was in the policy, prior policy. It is still listed as direction in this policy. However, the intention is not to hold back all of the budget to go purchase large amounts of clothing or anything like that. It is to allow council that flexibility if something comes up that they did not foresee in their budget, that they're able to reallocate that through the year to identify something that comes up.
Okay, and this, I mean, my budget is actually quite a bit lower than council's budget when it comes to what this applies to. I don't even remember what that number is. You don't know, where could I find what the actual budget amounts are?
Through the chair, I definitely would be able to send that information to you. We just don't have that handy, but you are correct that counselors are given a set amount for promotional pieces in their budget, and that differentiates between regional counselor and local counselor and yourself. So we would have to look up those numbers and send them to you.
Okay, and I'm not saying anybody has, I'm not saying anybody will, but I'm just saying the absolute wording of this would allow potentially something like that to happen. And I don't think that is the spirit of this policy to allow that type of thing. So I don't know, I think I would be more comfortable when it said may reallocate their budget spending between expense categories, but not including the clothing budget. I don't know if there's any issues with council on that, but that is just a concern that comes to mind when I read this. And I'm not saying anybody would abuse it, but it is something that could be manipulated in such a way that would, you know, make us look bad, because it's just not something I don't think that we intend to do. Going down to where it speaks to marketing and promotion material, 5.1.2. Can you give an example of what marketing and promotional would be? I thought business cards, of course, but is there anything else?
Through the chair, I would say that this could center around any advertisement that they would like to do, whether it's like a Remembrance Day or Happy New Year. Any park members are also able to spend money on production of flyers or graphics or any sort of item to support events that they might be having in their local areas. So, I mean, the intention is to be broad enough to allow counselors to be able to support their projects that they would like to see in their wards. It's to support connection with constituents and engagement with constituents, as well as engagement. So that is the essence of this particular clause.
Okay, just to be clear, I mean, it says council. I am a member of council, yet the mayor has many different rules on a lot of these things, but those aren't specified in here. Like, I don't know that I have access to funding for a Remembrance Day advertisement, for instance. Is that something that's new to this round, or was that something that was available before? Because I don't recall that being available before.
Through the chair, yes, it's been available to members through previous council. This is not a new clause or item, and I do believe that you have a budget to be able to spend on these items. So I mean, if you can provide some clarity as to what you believe you're not able to do. I know that your budget is different than the others, because you do have the support of the Office of the CAO. So we might have to clarify, you might have to present some differences you believe exist.
And just to the 5.1.4 content management and design, I guess my interpretation of that is that's for website setup, that type of thing. But as far as ongoing, like hiring a company to manage your social media and do your posts for you, would not be included in that, because it looks like that's excluded later on under section 7.1.6. I just want to make that clarification.
members are permitted to utilize the funds for ongoing support throughout the term. So 7.1.6 is about utilizing the funds to support as a staff person.
Well, isn't it the same hiring a company is the same as hiring a staff person? I don't know the difference. You're paying your social media, yet we have a social media coordinator on staff at the town.
Through the chair, again, this is the only clarification here was to distinguish that counselors are permitted to use their funds how they see fit. And this was to say that you could hire you could hire a consultant, you could work with a company or a business, but that you could not use the funds, and council members were not permitted to use the funds to hire a staff person.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the CEO Baker, the distinction is that all staff are under the administration under the CAO's office, and so it makes things complicated. But if a member of council wishes to engage with an outside company to do their web design or ongoing web content or social media, then there is a distinction between actual town staff versus a contracted company.
Okay. And just as far as the branding portion where it speaks to design support, that type of thing, I have seen some members of council using their own branding, which is fine. I personally think we should all be consistent and use the town of Ajax stuff, but if this is paid for by the town, what I don't want to see is these brandings appearing on election literature. I assume it says in here that anything paid for is owned by the town.
Through the chair, there will be an election policy moving forward that will speak to the specific concern that you bring up at this point. There will be some language around that to support that. In terms of the utilization of staff and the staff support that's available within the office of the CAO, that is always there as a choice for the members, and it's actually very much encouraged as your first step is to obviously consult with the staff that's available within the office of the CAO. There's a lot of expertise within the office of the CAO, so that would be the primary stop first. However, there are counselors that wish to spend their permitted allotment on support outside, which is also permitted as per the policy. So what we say is it's encouraged to come to staff first, and that will be outlined in an upcoming policy, and it's called Council Communication Tools and Support, and it'll be clearly outlined there that that members are encouraged to come to the office of the CAO or other departments. There's expertise throughout the entire town, whether it's our office, my office, or the department heads or other areas of specialty where you can get the support that you're required before going outside.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair. Those are my questions.
You are welcome. We have a few members that wish to ask questions. First, I have Regional Councillor Lee. You have the floor.
Just a very quick question. To the mayor's point, if someone decided to spend their total allotment on hoodies, that's public. Sorry, can you hear me? That's publicly disclosed, is it not? Like, there's a one point where we will go over everyone's expenses, and that'll be like publicly available. So, like, I understand the mayor's point of just like, yeah, I mean, we shouldn't be doing that, and I don't think any one of us will do that. But if someone is insane enough to do that, then there will be repercussions for that individual. And I don't think it'll turn on the entire council for not catching that. So can the treasurer confirm that?
Okay, through the chair. So I'm just looking at the budgets that are identified for mayor and council, and they are specific to public relations, education and training, your staff, the salaries and benefits, as well as car allowance and telephone costs. Some of the other items, such as clothing, would be accounted for under the CAO, Office of the CAO's budget. So that would have to filter through that authority for approval. So technically, what I think the spirit of this policy is to ensure that the budget that is approved for council, for public relations, for education and training, that they're adhered to. However, if perhaps a special education session becomes available that you did not budget for back in January or February, that you have that ability to utilize perhaps some public relation funding in place to go towards that education and training. So I hope that provides some clarity.
Through the chair, I just want to clarify, and the treasurer may be able to clarify further. When there is reporting, it's not itemized. It's only reported through the categories that were identified by the treasurer. So it wouldn't itemize what you're speaking to, Councillor Lee.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. Thank you, Chair.
You're welcome. Thank you. Regional Councillor Crawford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm curious, if you don't believe that it's professional to brand ourselves, are we allowed to use letterhead at the town?
Through the chair, I'm sorry if you thought that those were my words.
No.
No, but I think those are my words.
That was the mayor's words.
Okay. Through the chair, Councillor Crawford, there are letterheads, and you do have a council letterhead that you are supported by. Did you want something different than that could be altered so that it's specifically from Regional Councillor Crawford? Is that what you're suggesting?
Well, no, I was just trying to understand. I guess I don't understand what the problem with branding yourself is, because if we're different than the mayor. The mayor has the disposal of the entire CAO's office to do all of his promotion, and we don't really have that. So, for instance, if we hire someone to set up a website, and we're only allowed to cost that, I have no idea how to run a website. So does that mean the rest of it comes out of my pocket? The whole idea of the social media, yes, there's times where the social media coordinator does post things on our personal site, but certainly doesn't run my website, doesn't have time to run all 6 of our websites. So we need to incorporate outside help for that. And we can't pay, I mean, the social media department would have to be huge to handle all of our websites. So my understanding was that was allowed and encouraged to have, if that's what we wanted to do. So, I guess I don't think the comparison between what the mayor has, which is fine, that he is the big guy, like that's fine. But the comparison between that and 6 other councillors, I don't even think it's the same. It's in the same bucket. if I'm wrong, please let me know. But I don't think it's comparable.
Mayor Collier.
Just to respond, thank you, Chair, to Councillor Crawford. That's not what I was saying. So if I came across that way, then I apologize. What I was saying is specific branding. So I've seen 3 members of council, not you, using their own specific branding, like their own almost custom letterhead, putting things out on social media, which is fine. But all I'm saying is, if the design of those brands are paid for through this budget, that is town owned and should not be used for election purposes. That is what I was saying when I talked about that. As far as ongoing maintenance and everything of websites and social media, no, that is all covered under this budget, and I wasn't suggesting that it not be. So I hope that clarifies.
Mr. Chair, may I just say something? So I think the same would go for websites, correct? So if a town, if you've got the town paying for your website currently, then when it comes to election time, that has to all change, right? Is that like, it's the same sort of thing, right? And it becomes
That's specified in the policy. Yeah.
Pardon me, sorry?
That is specified in the policy websites.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome.
Through the chair, I'd just like to clarify that and tell Regional Council Maryland that yes, that is accurate, that you would have to change to a constituent website for the election.
All right. Any other questions on 4.1?
I'll move the report, Chair.
Yes, moved by Mayor Collier. All those in favor? I see all hands. The motion carries. We'll now move on to item 4.2. Mayor Collier, all yours.
Thank you. And this will be through you, Chair, to Director Valentin. Let me just find my questions. Okay. So I guess to start, what was the original? Oh, hold on, wrong report. Let me find my question here.
Chair, what is the report we're looking at? Sorry.
4.2.
Next one. Sorry, I don't think I actually have any questions on this one, Chair.
Okay, no problem.
I'm glad to move the report. I don't have any questions.
Okay, all those in favor of the mayor moving the report? I see none opposed. That motion carries. 4.3, Mayor Collier.
All right. This one, I definitely have a few. So just first of all, where is it?
Sorry, Director Valentin.
Just looking on to recommendation number 2, that staff be authorized to resume investments as deemed appropriate by the treasurer. Ms. Valentin, can you tell me what those investments would be, please?
Through the chair to Mayor Collier. Well, we want to be able to have options. So I don't have anything specifically right now. I am getting identified marketing from various investment organizations on their GICs, on various things. So having opportunities, if there is something that comes up that is better than what we're currently getting in the bank, I'd like to be able to have that opportunity to invest. So right now, based on council's recommendation over a year ago, we have been told not to invest in any GICs or anything. So that recommendation was just to provide that option.
Well, that's why I asked, because we've given direction to not reinvest. I don't think we said don't reinvest in GICs going forward. I think we just said don't renew those that are coming, that are maturing, while we're looking at the investment policy. But since we haven't done a new investment policy, this recommendation is asking us to authorize you to make investments within our current policy, which I believe is only GICs.
Through the chair, it is not only GICs. It does have opportunities for one investment as well. There are broad eligibility as far as from the policy. I believe the policy was updated in 2019. But I think what was chosen to in the past was GICs, but we do have the flexibility within the current policy.
Okay. Moving down to the page 36, the investment strategy options. Can you tell me how much we pay each year in banking fees? It says in here that our current banking agreement is set to expire in July.
I think manager, Ms. Sarong is on the call as well. I'm not sure what our total banking fees are. They're tiered all over based on various things. So the interest that we're getting right now on the bank bank balances that we have range from 0.75 to 0.85% right now, which is considerably higher than what I'm seeing out there for GICs or even high interest savings accounts.
No, but what I'm asking is how much do we pay the bank to do our banking with them? It's got to be in the hundreds of thousands, I would think.
Excuse me, Chair, if I can interrupt. I think I remember from the operating budget, it was around 400,000 and change because I asked specifically that question.
Okay, does that sound reasonable, Ms. Valentin?
I'll ask Mrs. Sarong if she can speak to that.
Through the chair to Mayor Collier, the banking fees is actually 31,500. It's approximately 32,000, and that's just the administrative fee for bank charges for daily transaction activities.
Okay, well, I'm happy about that. It's a lot less than I thought. When we renew this banking agreement, do we do an RFP? I assume we do an RFP out to all major banks. Is that correct, or how is the process done?
Through the chair, we are not obligated to do that. I did a scan of other municipalities. It's a lot of work to be changing our banking on absolutely everything. We have a lot of direct payments that come in. We're looking probably not to do an RFP because of the sheer magnitude of change that would be required. Most of the financial institutions provide the same level of service. So we are going to be negotiating with our current provider to see what enhancements we can get.
Okay, well, I'm asking because one of the reasons for this report is to look at getting better rates of return for our investment portfolio. And given the very low interest rates out there for GICs, I would think that that could be something we could maybe negotiate with a bank, especially if we were to bring them new business and an $80-odd million investment portfolio.
Through the chair,
to get some better rates.
Through the chair to the mayor, from my investigations, I think we are getting a pretty good rate right now. Based on the discussions I've had with the other area treasurers, some of the other financial institutions are adjusting the rates that their agreements have been based on the current economic environment. Our financial institution has not done that with us. They've maintained the current rate that we have. So we have a very good working relationship with them. We will do our due diligence to make sure that we are getting what we feel is the best value for dollars and the best return. So we will ensure that we do that.
Okay, so it's sounding to me that when it says the town's current banking agreement is set to expire, the intent is just to renew with the same bank.
Through the chair, at this point, yes.
Okay. Moving down to page 3 of the report, dedicated investment staff, page 37 of the agenda, where it says a new staff member with investment knowledge could provide essential in-house expertise. I don't like the word could. Would be much better. If we're going to bring somebody on, I would expect that they would be able to give advice that would benefit us. But at the same time, I don't think I would ever want to put a staff member in that situation of potentially having to report back with a potential negative return on a decision they had made or a recommendation they had made. So I'm not liking that recommendation, but what are we doing to develop an investment policy that sets out this council's risk tolerances, goals and objectives, timelines, that type of thing? Because those are the underlying policies that we need to even know, for instance, you used one investment, which segment of one investment's basket of products that we should be putting money in and what percentage of each long and short term. Without the risk tolerance, goals, objectives, and timeframes, we can't make those decisions whether we hire a new person or not. So I think that would be the first step. What are we doing on that first step?
Through the chair, right now, as mentioned in the report, we don't have dedicated staff which is doing doing any of that. And that's where the suggestion of having somebody with that expert investment knowledge could provide some of that direction. Right now, we're waiting on the outcome also of the asset management plan. We do know what balances we have in our reserves. However, we have to provide, we have to look at the long-term, the 10-year requirements through the asset management plan. So that project is taking a little bit longer for us to be able to identify what funds would be available within that 10-year timeframe. We have a shorter period right now. We look at our cash flows for the budget when it comes forward. However, when unbudgeted projects come forward or grant opportunities, those are not taken into consideration at budget time. Those are unknown at that time. So, and that's where the direction, the option to bring in someone that could dedicate their time and effort to review those things. That's what item number 1 was, to provide, request that dedicated investment staff.
Okay. Going back to GICs for a second, just because I'm trying to understand your last response. If we're looking at, we have long and short-term investments. So you're looking, let's say we're a year ago and you're looking at GICs and you're looking whether to do them for a 1 year or 5 year. Obviously, staff have already done the analysis to know, make sure we have enough funds to get us through and we have enough liquid cash to get us through and can lock in the other amounts for longer term. We do that already, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm not understanding how that's different than looking at just different types of investments. Like instead of a 5-year GIC, if it's 5 to 10 year time frame, which we've already identified, it's the same exercise going into a balanced or equity fund instead of a 5-year GIC. I'm just trying to understand, because it seems to me we're already doing that work. Just we're talking about a different product.
Through the chair. So we are doing some of that work, yes, but we're investing more on a passive basis. So we don't look at opportunities such as when we collect taxes on a quarterly basis for the region. Like we may have other opportunities for a short-term investment there. Looking at the long-term, there's a lot of things that get brought forward. So we're not investing the ultimate amount that we potentially could be. We're investing a very conservative amount for the long term because we don't have great details right now on our requirements out to 10 years.
Okay. I have reviewed the one investment in quite a bit of detail, and they do appear to have some pretty decent returns as well as some very, looks like very low fees. But again, until we do that exercise highlighting exactly what you just said, the time frame and those types of things, how much we can lock up for longer term, we can't really go ahead with that. Prudent investment standard didn't look like something that we should be doing. Outsourcing chief investment officer is not there yet. Future region and Durham joint investment program is not there yet. Just comment. Those are my questions, Mr. Chair. I do have an amendment, but I won't bring it forward until other members of council have asked their questions. Thank you.
Do we have any other questions? Councillor Bauer, please proceed.
Thank you, Chair. Hi, Director Valentin. So my question is just about number 3, the third recommendation, and that staff be directed to procure assistance to review and develop investment strategies and update the town's investment policy. What kind of timeline are we looking at? Is there a timeline for this?
Through the chair to Councillor Bauer. I'm not sure at this point. This was a motion that was brought forward in January to bring forward options. We definitely try and do it as expeditiously as possible, but there's a lot of other things on the agenda right now on our plate. So I probably in the fall at some point, fall to end of year.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's it, Chair.
Any other questions? Back to you, Mayor. You have an amendment for the report?
Thank you, Chair. And I have not sent this to the clerk, but it's not lengthy. Basically, to delete item 2, recommendation 2, and replace recommendation 3, that becomes item 2, and it read staff be directed to issue an RFP to investment firms to develop investment strategies and update the town's investment policy. And I'll just speak to it quickly. I'm not interested in hiring a staff person for this. As someone that's worked in this business for the last 20 plus years, this is not something that a full-time staff, in my opinion, is going to be anywhere near enough workload for. I think we can find this expertise very easily in the open market. And I think, again, part of why I was fishing with how are we going to look at renewing our bank agreement, this could even be found in the banks. Although I'm not a fan of using the banks, this is something that is that readily available. So I think this could be something that we could very simply do, contract it out for a pretty small amount of money and probably get the information that we need to prepare this, I guess the policy, the foundation of, what type of investments are we looking at? What kind of time frames? What is our risk tolerance threshold? What is our liquidity that we need? What is the best types of investments? Is it one investment? Is it going through a private firm? Is it, I don't know. And what will the cost be ongoing to manage this investment portfolio? Which, quite honestly, staff don't need to be managing this investment portfolio. That's the last thing you want them to be doing. When I was a financial advisor, I would tell my clients, you don't want me managing your investments. That's what happens inside the portfolios. There's active management. They're the ones with their finger on the pulse. They're the ones with the in-depth knowledge and the research of the markets, and they're the ones making the day-to-day decisions. My job, and what I'm saying, this person's job that we bring on, would be to put together that portfolio with those baselines, risk tolerance, goals, objectives, timeframes. And then the active managers, the ones that take that over, they report back, and basically receiving those reports, whether it be from an active investment firm or whether it be from a bank on GICs, are pretty much the exact same things. So I'll leave it there, and hopefully I can count on council support. Thank you.
Ms. Valentin?
Thank you, through the chair, just to Mayor Collier. So part of our dilemma, I guess, or challenge right now is not knowing what cash is available, because we're doing this on more of a passive basis. So I guess the question, by bringing in an outside agency to review the risk tolerances and liquidity, there's still some internal work that needs to be done that this organization would not have. So that's where part of that dedicated individual, that's what we were looking for, is that assistance in-house to help provide some of that that due diligence as well.
Are you saying that staff aren't able, like, I would think that would be information that we would have fairly readily available, is just even looking at your past GIC practices, how much was kept in short-term and open would indicate to me the short-term upfront cash needs. I'm just not understanding why a full-time person would be needed to be able to put that information together. I see CAO Baker, but Chair.
Please proceed, CAO Baker.
Through you, Mr. Chair, in discussions that I've had with Director Valentin, what I was prepared to do was authorize a contract position. There's nobody that we have in-house that's working on this right now. And as the treasurer has mentioned, there's a lot of things on finance's plate. We're just starting the next year's budget, capital budget, and so on. And even if we do go outside, and that's probably a good way to go with RFP or so, and there still needs to be somebody internally that they report to and manages that particular contractor. But the solution that we talked about was bringing a contract staff in, even for 6 months, just to manage this process so that we can report back. And I'm going to ask Director Valentin to speak to that and her ability to be able to manage such an RFP and a process, and how would that be done?
Thank you, through the chair. Yeah, that by having that dedicated staff to be able to have, that has some of that expert knowledge to be able to kind of write the RFP that we'd be looking for, to be able to provide that in-house knowledge of what we have here to then be able to translate that out into the investment realm to see what our availability would be based on the needs that we have. So we don't have, as far as I understand, I mean, I haven't been here that long here. So my understanding is there's nobody currently actively doing regular investment reviews. They would be looking at, you know, when a current investment comes up, do we need the funding? If not, they would reinvest it for another period of time. So I know Ms. Sarong is on the line as well. I'm not sure if she has any input or any feedback as well.
Through the chair to Mayor Collier, my thoughts on this would be the cash flow modeling needs to be developed based on understanding several factors. So there were many reasons that we have not been actively investing in short-term investments more in the long-term GIC. It's the unknown of the casino slots revenue coming in. It's the asset management, it's knowing the CIP obligations. There were several factors, several things that we were working on to get that information in process, in addition to a 10-year capital program, which would pretty much give us a solid idea of cash flow in terms of commitment and then be able to invest. So those were the layers that we were trying to put in place prior to determining investments.
Okay, so would it be helpful to amend the wording? Item 3 right now, sorry, through the chair, item 3 right now says staff be directed to procure assistance. As I said, I'm not looking to hire a full-time permanent staff member. If CAO Baker is willing to authorize a contract person, I am fine amending the wording to basically be that staff be authorized to procure a, I guess, part-time assistance or contract assistance, and then to develop an RFP to be issued to investment firms to develop investment strategies and update the town's investment policies. Does that work better?
Yes, I believe so.
Go ahead, CEO Baker.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that was how I envisioned this, absolutely, so that we can, you know, we don't want to get the direction from council and it drags on because we don't have internal staff to be able to manage it. We need that resource, and it will help us. You know, this is kind of uncharted territory, as the mayor's aware, for Ajax, and we want to make sure we do it right. And I think it's important, as the director has mentioned, that we need somebody with some expertise that can also provide advice to in-house finance staff as to how to manage through this. So yes, short-term contract for 6 months to see to try and push this initiative through, I think is what I would feel most comfortable with, for sure.
And do we, just one other follow-up question, please, Chair. Do we know how long you expect that this would take to be able to do that analysis and get that turned around?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm hoping that the contract staff gets us to an RFP quickly, and whoever we hire through as a consultant could do that work quickly. But I'm not sure how long that would take. I would expect the timeline that Director Valentin has already mentioned is, you know, we would absolutely be trying to get it back before November.
Okay. And just looking down in the report, when you go down to the tables or the appendices at the very bottom, I mean, we can see that the bulk of the interest comes from our investment in Lexicon, which is not going to change. So by having these reserves not be invested at 0.5 to 0.75, which is what the current offering is, we're really not giving anything up, waiting for those few months to November to do this work. I don't think. Would that be a fair statement, Ms. Valentin? It's nominal.
Through the chair, I would agree. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much, Chair.
Okay. Before we move forward, Councillor Bauer, you had a question?
Yes, thank you, Chair. And I think my question is to the mayor. When you were talking about your amendment regarding the risk tolerance, investment objectives, the timeline horizon, et cetera, that kind of collection of data to determine what investments to recommend, who are you and who is answering those questions? Because that is subjective data based on the individual, you know, comfort level. So I want to understand, you know, who is coming up with the guidelines for what we are going to be asking for.
I would expect, thank you, Councilor Bauer. I would expect that, because everybody, you're right, everybody is different. My risk tolerance, I pretty much guarantee, is a lot higher than probably yours and most people here, right? And that's not the one we should use for this. I expect staff through this exercise will be able to report back with some recommendations, and then it will ultimately be up to council to make that decision, because we are the ones that will have to be ultimately responsible for the decision. Does that answer your question?
Yes, I think so. So we're going to be asking staff to deliver low, medium, and high risk, short-term, medium-term, long-term objectives, like that kind of stuff. So that we're not stuck with one solution. Okay.
Based on the portfolio as a whole, we need this much for short-term to satisfy short-term needs. This much, and then this stuff is long-term to grow out, and then we decide sort of where each one, what the comfort level is.
Okay, thank you. That was my question.
Okay, are those all the questions? If that's it, we can address your amendment, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Chair, I'm going to bring the amendment up on screen, and I just want to confirm the wording with the mover.
Please proceed.
That's half off my screen. One second. There we go. Yep, that's fine. Thank you, Mr. Clerk.
Okay, are we to vote on this?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, all those in favor of the mayor's amendment? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This carries unanimously. All those in favor? Okay, this is
report as amended.
This is approved. Thank you very much. Can I get a mover to adopt the recommendation in this report afterwards? Ms. Valentin, a question before the mover?
Yes, please. Sorry, can I just get clarification? So item 2 was deleted. So we are not, council does not want us to do any active investing at this point, right? We're just going to keep it all in the bank. Okay, sorry, I just needed that clarification.
Wonderful, thank you. Do I get a mover for the recommendation in that report? Moved by Mayor Collier. Those in favor? All in favor? None opposed? This carries. Oh, thank you very much. We will now move on to 4.5, Mayor Collier.
Sorry to make a short meeting long. Again, through you, Chair, to Ms. Valentin. Do you recall what the projected surplus was as of our last update?
Through the chair to Mayor Collier, we were projecting a deficit when we last reported of $708,000.
Okay. And if we have to go one way or another, I much prefer going this way. However, we made decisions at budget time based on the information we had at hand that, like when we're talking about automatic speed enforcement, for instance, I don't think we probably would have made the same decision if we had known this today. Is there anything that can be done going forward so we don't have, I mean, we're only talking about less than 3 months ago. Is there anything that can be done going forward that we won't, or we can have, because this is a pretty big number. This is over a $4 million swing, right? So from a deficit to a surplus, to have a little bit closer, accurate numbers when it comes to budget time with regards to deficit or surplus?
Through the chair to Mayor Collier, it's always our intention to provide the most up-to-date data to council to inform your decision. A lot of this information came to us, and it was, I mean, they were pleasant surprises to us, obviously, but they came in after the year end had like into 2021 already. So, for instance, I think the lexicon funding was identified late December, and the casino funding that we received notification in January. So, you know, and it was taking time. Staff were focusing on the budget and trying to get that allocated. And although we were receiving that, we didn't look at the full picture of the actuals at that time to really provide that level of detail. So we, you know, we're happy to take that, and we were happy to see that there was a surplus. We didn't have everything ironed out at that point to be able to publicize it.
Okay. We were not successful in requesting our phase 2 funding, but now that we are in a surplus position versus a deficit, does that have any, will we have to repay any of the COVID funding that we received from the federal government?
Through the chair to Mayor Collier. So the amount that we received in 2020, the 2.3 million, did not have any requirements. That was phase 1. So there's no requirement to pay any of that back. We did apply for phase 2, which we were denied, and that would have potentially been one that we may have had to pay back. The identified amounts of 991 and then the subsequent amounts that we've just been identified, there will be reporting requirements on that, and it is based on COVID expenditures, COVID operating expenditures. What I understand from the documentation is that if it's not utilized in 2021 for COVID, we can put it in a reserve and carry it forward to be used for COVID-related expenditures going forward. That same stipulation was not required on the first phase, the 2.3. So we took that full amount into our books in 2020. But moving forward, we are keeping track of our COVID expenditures, and we can only utilize that COVID funding for those COVID-related expenditures.
Okay, thank you. Moving down to page 4 of the report, page 54 of the agenda. When we talk about some of the under budget, we had to do with our new non-resident user fee for motor vehicle accidents. I see that's considerably, like almost a 2/3 under. We had something come forward earlier this year where it appeared that maybe the traffic or the identification information was not being collected when sometimes it maybe should have. Do we get any kind of report from fire which tells us of the number of accidents, how many were at fault, and how many we were successful in gathering the driver information versus how many we were not? I mean, this is a council approved policy. I just want to make sure that everybody is following the policy.
Through the chair, I'll answer what I can and then maybe pass it over to Chief Lang. As I understand it, the program was initiated and there was some coordination required with MTO. As I understand, though, the traffic volumes are down considerably due to COVID, which is probably one of the factors leading to this lower than expected budget amount. But perhaps Chief Lang, if there are other issues that were contributing to this shortfall, you could
Well,
speak.
I guess I just want to know, will we be receiving some sort of report which gives us that information? And if we, or can we receive some kind of report that gives us that information, Chief?
Through the chair to the mayor, it's Fire Chief Lang. Can you hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so yes, we are putting together a report with a few recommended changes just based on our experiences. It is true that traffic volume has been down in the town of Ajax, and that has definitely made a difference. But we are putting together a report now. We just want to make sure our information is correct, and it will come to council. I would suggest it's probably going to come to council with this year's fee schedule, an update, and we'll give you the information, and then we'll also ask for council's on the suggested changes, ask for council support.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Going down to grants and donations, it says the town incurred 1.3 million. This is on page 55 of the agenda. The town incurred 1.3 million in costs directly attributable to COVID-19. I'm just wondering, we did receive 991,000 this year and we've already passed our budget before we received that 991,000, I think. I had asked when we were talking about automatic speed enforcement a month or so ago, how much of our budget that we've done for this year was COVID-19 related. And I think I got a number back of about 400,000, but if we spent 1.3 million last year, I mean, how much do we expect the results to be about the same this year? How much of that was like one-time costs? Because the 400 seems pretty light for our costs this year.
Through the mayor, I trying desperately to find out. I'm not sure if one of my staff can help find those numbers. But when we were bringing forward the budget for 2021, we did not know at that point in time how long COVID or the pandemic would continue on. So we tried to budget as close to possible as a return to normal. There were identified, I think $140,000 is what I recall, of direct COVID related, the cleaning and cleaning protocol and such that was identified in the budget, but we really tried to do more of a return to normal. What we're doing now, and there were a lot of one-time costs as far as putting up plexiglass and things like that, which would have been incurred last year, which we shouldn't have to incur this year, but there are likely other items that are coming forward. You know, the requirements on specific masks or changing priorities that will come up, that, you know, having to continue to change signage at our playgrounds and various things. So that's all costs that we're incurring on a regular basis. Does that answer your question?
Kind of, and actually you're right, I misspoke. It wasn't 400,000, it was 140,000. I do remember that now. And I thought that was fairly light, especially given the 1.3 for last year, but I do understand the upfront cost. I guess the number I'm hoping that we reach is 353,000 or whatever the automatic speed enforcement amount was that I'd like to see brought back, but I'll follow up on that after. I won't get into that one. Just moving down. I just want to talk about some of the transfers to the, so the first ones are as per the FSP. So the post-growth capital reserve, the investment income. But the stabilization, you're suggesting we transfer 1.386506 to the stabilization reserve of the surplus. And just so I'm clear, that amount is not absolutely in stone as per the FSP. That's your recommendation, right?
Through the chair. So I think I believe you're probably looking at table 3 of the report on page 58.
Yes.
If you just skim down just a bit further onto page 59,
yep.
Table 4, it identifies this. So the surplus allocation, the top up to the target is 608,189. We have several master plans and things that are coming forward. The draft plan has been brought forward internally to staff. We are recognizing that there's a need coming forward, so we tried to earmark some funding for that particular purpose.
Yeah, I'm going to get to that, but just to answer my question, this number that you've given us, we have some flexibility. This isn't something that's specified and fixed in the FSP. This is a recommendation.
Through the chair to Mayor Collier. So I would, the 608 is specific to the FSP. So we top it back up to where it needs to be.
Okay, thank you. To the 744,000 that we took last year to reduce the budget by 1%, the budget increased by 1%. We put that back in the 2021 budget. So I'm unclear as to why that's here, because my understanding was we had already put that back in this year earlier.
Through the chair to Mayor Collier. So the surplus last year, I believe, was about half of that 744. Right. So that is what had gone back in. So there was still a piece missing. When we look at the stabilization reserve, it is a bit of a moving target because it's 5% of the net revenues from the previous year. So when we did that calculation, a total of $608,000 was required to get us to that minimum threshold of 5%.
Okay. So I don't have a problem with the 608,000. I just was confused with the 744 because I was pretty sure that we'd made that up, what we took out even with the lower surplus, but that's fine. What I have a concern with is I understand the fire master plan is coming. I have not seen it. We have, I just called a special meeting today so as to see that at the end of this month. But we're basically, you're suggesting that we allocate funding from our reserve so we can do mid-year implementation of some recommendations that none of us have seen yet in council.
Through the chair to Mayor Collier. Well, I was hoping that the policies would come, that they would come in tandem. That hasn't been the case. So it is an identified placeholder at this point.
Okay, my question is, if we make this decision today to follow your recommendation and put that 1.386 million into the surplus, are council still able to, if we decide after we've seen this report to go a different direction, able to change that? I don't want to get something like with the FSP and be locked into this allocation when we have a number of other things. And also we are having to look very closely, given the loss of our slots, at our capital budget. And there are some other things like stormwater, and I think Councillor Lee has another reserve that he's talking about bringing forward. There are other needs. I just don't want to lock this money into something and then not be able to change it later.
Through the chair, Mayor Collier. So yes, if council would like that to provide that direction, that if it's not utilized this year for the priority initiatives, that you could provide some direction of where you would like that funding to go then, if you don't want it staying in the stabilization reserve. Well,
okay. Alternately, if instead of following your recommendation of putting the 1.386 million in the stabilization reserve, which reserve would it be? Capital contingency that we could put that money that we could later transfer it to the stabilization reserve if needed, where we're not locked in? Because I don't know what other reserve to put in an amendment today without getting the other.
CEO Baker.
Baker, you can chime in as you need to, please.
So through the chair, when I had this discussion with Director Valentin, we were looking for the reserve that firstly would if council decides that they want to approve some of the recommendations from the fire master plan, for instance, the stabilization reserve is the easiest one to do that from. Putting it into a capital reserve, in any of the recommendations that I've seen that I would be supportive of moving forward would be our operational recommendations. They're not capital recommendations. So, but it was my understanding that that there is no, this money is not locked into the tax rate stabilization reserve. These are funds over and above what are required by the FSP, and just they're in that reserve for council to be able to make any decisions that they might want to make. But to the mayor's question, if council chooses not to make any, to approve any recommendations from the fire master plan or whatever else, that those monies, because they aren't really required under the FSP to go to the stabilization reserve, they can be directed wherever council wishes them to go. Would that be correct, Director Valentin?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, through the chair, we could definitely do that. We could also use the recommendations under the FSP that it gets split between the various capital accounts. So the intent here, as CEO Baker had identified, was to identify it for an operating need mid-year prior to budget. If it doesn't get utilized for that, then council can provide me direction to transfer that funding out of the stabilization reserve by the end of this year into a different capital contingency or a capital reserve.
And through Mr. Chair, to be totally clear, it's not that I'm intending that council may decide to do so, but it's not that I'm intending to bring forward a mid-year recommendation for spending of money. Actually, the reason why that money has been put aside is to help reduce any impact on the tax rate moving forward. So it could very well be a 2022 budget implementation, but that money is there to help reduce the impact and spread it out over a couple of years.
Right, but then we're still in a situation where we have to repay that in future years. If we use it for that purpose, it leaves a hole, as we've said.
Yeah.
I don't want to make a hole. I want to. So Ms. Valentin, what reserve do we have that is kind of a slush fund that can be used, a discretionary type, if we have a project or a capital project or that we can move this money around to? I don't think we can use it for, well, I won't get into operating versus capital, but what do we have that is just sort of a discretionary?
Through the chair to Mayor Collier. So I don't have a slush fund. So I just wanted to say that. That was part of my dilemma myself, not putting it into, say, the capital contingency reserve, because that is identified for capital. Was hoping, as I identified, that the fire master plan would have come prior to this report or in tandem to be able to then transfer that funding out. But perhaps then council can provide some direction that this is outside of the stabilization reserve minimum target, and it will be utilized for priority initiatives throughout the year or transferred to another capital reserve, so that it does come out of the stabilization reserve so that you don't have to pay it back.
Sorry, can you say that one more time?
Okay, so if through the recommendations that come forward with any of the master plans, the funding does not get utilized in 2021 for operating to help with the operating impact, council can provide direction to move that 778 out of the stabilization reserve into a different reserve and not impact the stabilization reserve and not have to pay it back.
Okay, but we have to remember to do that before December 31st.
And through the chair, I'll remind you. If I don't get direction, I'll need some direction. So.
Okay, thank you. Those are my questions, Chair. Thank you, and I'll find moving the recommendation.
You're welcome. We have questions from Regional Councillor Crawford.
I promise to not be as long. My
Thorough.
question. What?
Thorough.
Thorough. Okay, thorough. I won't be as thorough. My question is around the stormwater management reserve. We just recently had a report that suggested we could put a levy on the taxpayers. And I'm curious as to why we wouldn't be looking at a percentage of this. I mean, during the budget talks, we were going to take the reserve from the library and put it into the stormwater management reserve if we had one. I'm not even sure if we were developing it or if we actually have one. So why wouldn't we put a percentage of this into that reserve itself? Or is it in there and I missed it? And I apologize if I did. And I know this conversation seems to have gone around in circles, so I apologize if I missed it.
So through you, Mr. Chair, as Director Valentin has mentioned, there are a couple of competing costly items that are coming forward to council, and we wanted to just simply put the money aside into this particular reserve so that until you've had the opportunity to see all of these presentations, and then you can determine what you want to do with the money. That's the short answer.
And I really actually think that's smart. I mean, I can't imagine that the fire master plan comes back with absolutely no recommendations to spend any money. So yeah, so I think that's a wise decision. I think that when we have a reserve, I would always love to see somehow, and I don't know how this happens or if it could happen. I'm no financial whiz, that's for sure. But a percentage of it to be able to go back to keep the tax base low as a reward to our taxpayers for a change. Just even a small percentage to say we're going to put this into our our operating funds so that we don't have to have the increases that we've had in the past. I get we've got competing things happening that are going to be coming up very, very shortly, but I always think that it would be really nice to be able to have something like that when we have such a huge surplus. Anyway, just my comments. I'm sure you've got comments to that.
Valentin?
Thank you, through Chair, to Regional Councillor Crawford. So although, just to your last point, if we do put that money back in to reduce the tax levy, it's a one-time amount, which then you're going to build a hole and you're going to have to, then it becomes double the next time. So unless it's a sustainable revenue source, it's not fully recommended to do that unless it's a, offsetting a one-time expenditure that will be coming forward. Just to answer some of your previous questions, we do have a stormwater reserve. What was identified through the capital budget is does not have a sustainable funding source. So, and that's why the stormwater feasibility study is coming forward. What I've recommended through this report, through the surplus report, is to actually put $300,000 of the surplus towards the stormwater reserve, stormwater maintenance reserve, to help in the next year with some of the projects that are coming forward.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, everyone, for that thorough discussion. Do we have any other questions on 4.5? I see no hands. The mayor has already moved this. All those in favor? I see all hands, none is opposed. This motion carries. Now we will move on to 4.7, my favorite, automated speed enforcement project scope change and award of contract. Mr. Mayor, floor is yours.
Last one, I promise. This is one I desperately want to see move forward. I'm fine with the change of scope and getting these speed boards. Part of my questions you've all heard me asking on a lot of these things was, funding related, and we made the decision not to proceed with this project because of funding constraints, which we don't appear to have anymore with this respect. So I'm hoping this is, sort of the last thing we need to get this project moving forward, put these speed boards in place, and get that staff person that we're talking about that needs to get the other data that we need to finally make this decision moving forward. So I did have a lot of questions put aside. I was able to ask some of them during the mayor's meeting earlier, and I will leave it at that. Thank you, Chair.
You are welcome. Can I get a mover to adopt the recommendation of these reports? Moved by Regional Councillor Lee. Are all those in favor? There is none opposed. This motion carries. Thank you very much. That went very well. We went just over an hour and a quarter. So moving on to the next item on our agenda, seeing there are no discussions, we will move directly on to presentations. I just want to discuss what they are. We have two presentations today. One on the town's hiring practices that's going to be brought forward by CAO Baker and Mary Lou Constantino, Manager of Human Resource Services, which will be verbal, and another presentation on Textile Diversion Program with Director Romanowski. Now, this presentation was prepared by Cameron Richardson, the Supervisor of Environmental Sustainability and Climate Change. But first, we have CEO Baker. You have the floor. There he is.
Actually, Mr. Chair, I am looking for, there's Mary Lou Costantino's on here. Okay. This is her presentation. I will let her lead council through this. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Hi, Mary Lou. You're muted.
Good afternoon. I'm just going to pull up the presentation. Okay, does everybody see that? Can everybody see that? Sorry.
I can see it. I think we can all see it.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. So good afternoon, Mayor and members of council. Thank you for the opportunity to present the town's inclusive hiring practices. Natasha Sharma and I, who is the Diversity and Inclusion Coordinator, They were working together to implement both short and long-term initiatives as they pertain to diversity and inclusion and HR services. And I believe she's also here to address any questions that you may have at the end of the presentation. So in terms of our objective today, we're here to provide an update on improvements and upcoming initiatives as they relate to the town's commitment to inclusive hiring practices. What is diversity in the workplace? Basically, it's an organization that employs a wide range of diverse individuals with varying characteristics. An inclusive employer with people of varying genders, ages, religion, race, ethnicity, cultural backgrounds, sexual orientation, languages, education, abilities, etc. And it also is creating a culture that is accepting and has a strong and positive effect on individuals and connects staff in the organization. So some of the benefits of a diverse and inclusive workforce includes, or it allows organizations to have a wide variety of perspectives. Obviously, if you have people in an organization from various backgrounds, that allows you to have that variety of perspectives. It also allows the organization to increase their creativity, higher innovation, better decision-making, higher employee engagement, lower turnover, improve hiring results, and improve the town's reputation and brand. So overall, the town's hiring principles here at the town of Ajax, we seek to hire the most qualified candidate for the job. We strive to attract a candidate pool that reflects our communities. We want to ensure fair, equitable, and legally defensible hiring processes. And we map candidates to job requirements and core competencies. We lead with equality, values, and respect. But in recruitment and our hiring obligations, we have to ensure that our hiring practices meet various employment-related statutes and legislation. As well, we need to ensure that we're always in compliance with our collective agreement obligations. Some of the various legislation, such as the Human Rights Code, Employment Standards Act, AODA compliance, those are just some examples of some of the legislation that we're required to ensure compliance with. The Human Rights Code, well, that prohibits the actions that discriminate against people on the basis of a prohibited ground. And listed here are some of those prohibited grounds, such as race, ancestry, place of origin, color, ethnic origin, citizenship, creed, sex, including pregnancy, sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, record of offenses, marital status, family status, disability, and receipt of public assistance. In addition, we have to ensure that we have accommodation requirements. So there's a procedural aspects, which includes the duty to inquire about accommodation when we're interviewing candidates. And again, we also have our collective agreement obligations. So when I started here at the town of Ajax 2 years ago, I also hired other expert staff in HR during this term of council. And the hiring process underwent a major overhaul. And we introduced a new process in 2020. With the new process, we were able to achieve legislative compliance. And in addition, we have now objective criteria that we now use to evaluate candidates to ensure that fairness, transparency, and compliance with employment legislation. I have two HR generalists who are trained in conducting interviews from DDI International. So DDI International is a global firm with over 50 years helping organizations hire, promote, develop exceptional leadership. DDI recruitment processes assist in eliminating bias, in recruiting and selecting applicants by using consistent hiring criteria and scoring processes. I'm going to walk you through the selection process just so that to give you a little bit better of an understanding of what we do.
Mary, can I interrupt you for 1 second?
You may.
Presentation mode. Could you switch it to presentation mode?
Okay, how do I do that?
Very small screen, so it would help.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
Sorry to interrupt you.
That's okay.
If it helps, just bring your mouse to the bottom of the screen.
Okay.
And then you see the slideshow right next to the go left. And then, sorry, on the right side, next to your size, there's a little presentation icon on the bottom of the screen there. It says
Yeah, I'm looking at the bottom. It says notes, comments. Yeah.
Not that one. Oh, keep going. Keep going. And keep going. This one.
Okay, there we go.
Boom. Thank you so much.
Okay, my apologies. Okay, here we go. So the new selection process obviously starts with a vacancy. So when there's a resignation, a retirement, or termination, we have a vacancy. The staffing requisition approval stage is really where departments fill out a requisition with pertinent information about the job, and the CAO approves filling of the position. Once that's done, we move on to the posting of the position. So the job description we have on file is developed, and the posting is based on that job description. The job description is broken down into several components which describe the skill, effort, working conditions, and job responsibilities. HR takes that information and provides a general overview to create the job posting. Once we have that information, we then post it on a variety of platforms. Once the position is posted, we then move on to the interview and selection preparation. This is where our HR generalists work with the hiring manager to prepare the selection process, including the interview guide. So again, based on the job description, the competencies of the job are determined, and the interview guide is prepared, which includes competency-based questions, situational-based questions, skill testing questions, and all of these questions have answer keys. HR currently has a library of over 7,000 questions and answers that measure over 120 competencies that DDI provided to us, and all of these questions can be tailored for either entry-level positions to the most senior level executive positions. At this point of the process, the hiring panel then determines if we will be providing tests to the candidates. These could be written tests, or they could be on-site tests, and/or we may decide that we'd like them to do a presentation as part of the selection process. All of this criteria makes up the selection process, and everything has a score attached to it. Once that process is completed, we move on to the interview and selection process. Candidates are selected by the hiring manager and the HR generalist. The applicant tracking system pulls out all of the resumes that meet the qualifications of the position which we posted. Candidates are then invited to interviews, and of course, if there are any accommodations required, those are put into place for when the candidates attend the interviews. All candidates are asked the same questions and are all evaluated by the interview panel based on the same objective criteria. And the candidate who scores the highest is offered the position. From there, we move on to checking references. Usually 2 to 3 references are obtained for the candidate. And then, providing those references are satisfactory, a job offer would be made. And from there, we move on to the onboarding process. So once the employee starts with the town offers an onboarding opportunity whereby employees complete various documentation and are provided with information about the town. For example, things like policies, benefits. And in addition to that, we also have developed some information on diversity and inclusion for staff. And Natasha will reach out to each new member of staff to discuss it with them. So how are we increasing diversity in the workplace? We continue to review our hiring and onboarding processes. We added the new diversity and inclusion presentation component, which Natasha had put together. We're working with the DISC and departments to identify innovative, integrated diversity and inclusion strategies in recruitment. We're working with the D&I coordinator to conduct the town's first ever census to better understand the makeup of our workforce. That would be the first phase. By gathering this information, we'll be able to obtain our organization's statistics compared to the community demographics. As well, we'll better to understand our statistics at different managerial and non-managerial levels and our statistics of our frontline staff. In the short term, we're looking at auditing job advertisements and sourcing new methods of advertising to diverse groups. So casting a wide net whenever we have vacancies. And we're also working with diversity and inclusion coordinator to establish internship programs for BIPOC groups. And of course, we'll continue with outreach efforts, including things like job fairs and partnerships. We are reviewing the hiring and promotional processes of the fire and emergency services to try to encourage more diverse workforce. We're also implementing unconscious bias training for all staff. And our senior advisor of employee and labor relations in HR, she's confirmed as a permanent member of the DISC committee. In terms of some of our long-term goals, we will continue to work with the D&I coordinator to set inclusion targets, track and share those results. We'll provide opportunities for candidates to get a sense of the diversity in the workplace or broader community, such as a tour or attendance at an event. We will develop an employer brand that showcases our diversity and consider hiring interview panels policy to help reduce unconscious bias. We also are looking to offer workplace policies to appeal to diverse candidates and create a strategy to attract diverse management candidates. Create a diverse pipeline for future roles through relationship building and networking, and also review technology benefits to hiring practices, things such as resume screening, blind resumes, and interviews. That concludes my presentation. Are there any questions?
Thank you very much. That was very, very enlightening. We do have a few questions from members. First one by Regional Councillor Lee, and then Regional Councillor Crawford right after Councillor Lee. Please work.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mary Lou, for that comprehensive presentation. I mean, it's good and bad. I mean, it's very good that we're going this right direction, but it's bad that it's taken us, in a sense, this long to kind of catch ourselves and to make sure to do a pulse check to make sure we're on the right track. So a lot of these long-term initiatives, which I wholeheartedly agree with, getting more diverse managerial content, blind resumes, when do we hope to start to have those implemented by?
I could, through the chair, could I refer to either Christy or Natasha on this question? Sorry. Natasha.
Mute.
You're on mute.
You're mute.
Hi, through the chair. I would just like to first I think that the best approach to this is to quantify data. So with the census information, I believe that from there will be an exact start and approach to re-amending policies and procedures and practices within HR. We do have a plan, obviously, with Mary Lou, as she so nicely put together the presentation there. But I think in order to really figure out the gaps within the organization, right now we have assumptions on gaps within the organizations, but we don't quite have the quantification of what those gaps would look like. And from there, that's when we would then implement the blind resumes and other practices to ensure more diversity within the organization.
Thank you for that answer. While I agree with your idea that we do need stats, something like a blind resume just seems like something we're going to adopt regardless of our stats, right? It just seems like a really good idea in general. So that's why specifically I was hoping we'd have some sort of action plan. But just starting with the census, because since you brought that up, when do we hope to have that done by? Realistically, it's a broadcast email once the question, there's a questionnaire, I'm assuming, that goes out to all our employees. Like that should be relatively quick to send and fill out and complete by and get data points for. When do we hope to have that census done by?
So the census right now, because of the COVID climate, it actually sounds like it would be that simple. Councillor, also through the chair, I apologize. It sounds like it would be that simple, but because of the sensitivity around what a census would entail and the personal information that staff may or may not feel safe to disclose to the organization, there will be like a 6-month plan or a few months. I'm not sure on 6 months for sure, but there will be a plan to then inform staff of what the census will be used for, why it will be important, for them to feel more comfortable in actually figuring out if they want to participate, why they are participating, how the data will be used within our organization, for them to actually buy into it and be able to feel more comfortable with that. I know in the past, through my listening tour, staff have made it very clear that, again, that trust building. So it is a simple survey at the end, but there's a lot of work to get there. So that's why it will take some time. And I think by establishing the connections between myself and the organization and with staff members personally, it would allow them to feel a little bit more comfortable, more informed, to be able to do the census towards the end. So I'm thinking sometime towards mid to end of next year would be great. And we've also had a lot of staff that were laid off. So it's a precarious time right now to do a census.
So I was very happy to hear about this. And then mid to late, we're talking about like a year and change. We'll call it a year and a half until we get results from a census, let alone before we start seeing action on our hiring practices based on what you're saying. And I understand the need for trust and I understand the need to repair, but in a sense we'll be 2.5, 3 years late, so to speak, on fixing some of these issues because we weren't able to get the data points as quickly. I guess like in terms of building that trust, are you doing like virtual tours to meet with staff to kind of overcome their objections, overcome their hesitation of filling out the survey? Is there a minimum number of survey results we need before we say that data is sufficient to move forward? Like I'm very curious about this because obviously, the DRPS is doing the same thing. They're doing a survey, and at regional council, we asked the same thing. We're just like, well, how long does it take to do a survey? And I want to see action on this sooner than later. There's absolutely an appetite within council, within the community, within employers to get started. And I understand doing it right. I want to make sure that's very clear. But if we're saying 2.5, 3 years before we start seeing the first measure implemented, that seems like a very long time where people are falling between the cracks, so to speak. So I asked a lot of questions there. I apologize. I guess the first one is just in terms of the census itself, timing. What's the minimum requirement? Do you have those answers in mind yet, or we haven't quite considered those yet?
So with regard, through the chair, thank you, Councillor Lee. With regard to the timeline, I'm thinking that we're going to have the full report not 2 years from now, but sometime next year. I would like to aim for next year. It's not going to be 2 years from now. It's not going to be 3 years from now. But with the requirements with that, it would be a need to have more. I'm in a virtual world. It would be great to have more information sessions with staff, personally with myself and the DISC committee. We've been having conversations about and building those relationships with staff through them. I've always had the transparency there, and I think that it's slowly working. You know, I think that the organization in the past wasn't up to, didn't have didn't have that person there to really build the internal relationships with staff members and take the time to build the relationships with staff members. And I think really that's where the start was. So in a world of virtual everything, I think being able to build a relationship would be the first start, informing staff of a census, and then also implementing that census. Christy, do you have a comment?
Through the chair to Councillor Lee. Yes, I just want to be clear that this is started. So it requires a full RFP process because that it's not just a survey, as you know, and you made clear. It requires professional assistance and a clear path line and deliverables with all of the pieces that Natasha outlined. So that RFP, I want to reassure you, is in process. Like it is in process right now, and it will be to finance shortly. And it will go out to all the best organizations that typically deliver these censuses and how sensitive they are. And then we'll get the RFPs back and we'll evaluate them, and then we will start immediately. So this has been a huge gap. This has actually been on the program, the census, for the last 8 years. It was brought up by a former councillor who is no longer here, and it has been in the strategic plan. It has been in our diversity plans, and every council previously and previous management said no to it. So this is this would be the first one ever done in the town of Ajax, and it requires a process, a step. That doesn't say that our lens and as you know, Natasha's lens is on absolutely everything. The D&I lens is reviewing everything we could possibly review. And I can tell you that we are working closely with HR, and we've identified those short-term goals for you. And the reason why we put those long-term goals in there is not to say that it's long-term, but to be honest with council, to say, we're just not there yet. But it doesn't mean we're not thinking about those pieces. It doesn't mean that we can't incorporate those innovative D&I strategies and approaches as we move along. So if it's something in terms of a timeline and action plan to get to the end, that is something that we can commit to council after this presentation as an action item, is to say, hey, how do we get to those long-term strategies and what actions need to be taken to get there? Because I think that will provide you some more reassurance that the work is being done and the work on the ground is being done, so that you'll feel a little bit more comfortable with that. We're not waiting until 2 years to implement new and innovative ways when we're talking about D&I. I mean, we talked about little things in there where we'd love if people wanted to know more about us, to that we'd be willing them to take them on tours of the town and to meet with our SMT and to show them our policies, talk to Natasha. Those are all great ways that we can start the recruitment process to get people at least applying to our positions. That's the first step. And we are working on those innovative recruitment ways to do that. So I just wanted to reassure you things are going, and we would be happy to provide a little bit of a better outline as to how we reach those HR specific actions that you're looking for.
Right. And I appreciate that. Thank you for the answer. That is very helpful. I guess my last comment then is, like you said, it took 8 years to get to this point, and we haven't actually sent out the survey yet. My concern is I just hope there's redundancies in place that, God forbid, Natasha leaves the town, and we hope she doesn't. She just started, she's doing great. But what if she leaves the town? Are we starting from square one again? Where it's like, well, got to hire the new D&I person. Oh, that person has to make all those relationships again. Oh, we're now like 12, 15 months back from the process, starting again. That I hope there's redundancies where it's like the process moves on in spite of who we have as our diversity, inclusion, and equity coordinator. And that's really important because, if she does get a better offer from the municipality, finds somewhere in the private sector, I don't want to just be like, well, she's the one who had all the relationships, so we have nothing moving forward. So that's just more of a comment. I don't need a question. There's no question there. Like I said, I'm excited for this. Obviously, this is really important, especially the past 3 years and all the issues we've seen, and all the light being shown on the town, on the region, on the country, on these practices and the importance of them. So I just want to say I appreciate all the work that the manager of HR and the diversity, inclusion, equity coordinator have done, and Christy yourself. And I'm just looking forward to seeing just tangible solutions going forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Lee, and thank you, Ms. Sharma and Ms. McClarty, for your input. That really clarified a lot of stuff. Next on the speaking list would be Regional Councillor Marilyn Crawford. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My questions have been answered.
You're welcome. And next in line is Councillor Bauer, and then we have the mayor.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for this excellent report. Very interesting and timely for sure. And it's something that is very important. So I guess my question is quite broad, but so it was explained that this is the new hiring process. My question is really, how different is it, or what are the major changes between our existing hiring process and the new process?
Through the chair to Councillor Bauer, the new hiring process, again, is more legally defensible. It provides us with more objective criteria in order for us to be able to evaluate each candidate against that objective criteria. In the past, that wasn't necessarily the case. And so it was identified as a gap when I started here at the town, and I knew that we needed to address this right away in order for us to be able to legally defend our decisions, and in order for us to continue to move forward and make objective decisions.
All right. Okay. Thank you very much. That's my only question, Chair.
You're welcome. Mayor Collier, and then Councillor Tyler Morin.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to Ms. Constantino. Just one question that hasn't been answered. And when you were going through the list of prohibited things to ask, one of them was record of offenses. And I wonder, I understand you can't ask that during the hiring process, but we do ask for a criminal reference check from a lot of our staff. They work with kids, they work, with the public. Is that still, once you've hired somebody, is that still an acceptable piece of acceptable document to ask for?
Through the chair to Mayor Collier, yes, it is. We do continue to request that information, particularly for those staff members who are working with vulnerable communities, members of the vulnerable community. So yes.
Okay. That's all the questions I had. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Tyler Morin.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to say thanks, this is a comment, just thanks to Ms. Sharma and Ms. Constantino for the focus. I think this shows that we're growing. There's a lot of action items within here. I'm looking forward to seeing them come to fruition. I agree with Regional Councillor Lee. It'd be nice to have it done as quickly as possible, but yeah, I just wanted to say that for the record. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, everyone. Are there any other questions on this presentation? I don't see any hands. I think it's safe that we move forward to the next presentation, the Textile Diversion Program by Director Romanowski and Cameron. You two have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will turn it over to Cameron Richardson, Supervisor of Environmental Sustainability and Climate Change, to take you through the Textile Diversion Program.
Thank you, Director.
Thank you, Director Romanowski. Can everyone see my presentation okay? Thank you. Yeah, so my name is Cameron Richardson. For those that do not know, I'm the Supervisor of Environmental Sustainability and Climate Change with the town. I'm here today to present on an Ajax Textile Diversion Program, and there is an accompanying report within the agenda. As background, this follows a direction that was given at the March 8th GGC meeting, where staff were directed to further investigate options to implement a textile diversion program in the town of Ajax and report back to council or the appropriate standing committee by May of 2021 with considerations and recommendations on such a program. For those that do not know, the term textiles is kind of a general term used to describe materials that are made up of natural and or synthetic fibers, threads, and filaments. So some examples of common items that everyone would know would be things like clothing, household linens, towels, curtains, accessories and bags, and even shoes and boots. So when I talk about textiles, I'm talking about those types of materials. Immediately following that direction from March 8th, I worked to consult with several external partners and stakeholders, as well as internal working groups. And here's a comprehensive list of those groups. So I made a focus of talking to municipalities that have some form of textile program that they run. It's important to note that these programs ranged from simple programs that are mainly just education and communication campaigns, all the way up to a program that City of Markham might run that is a larger program, more staff capacity, where they have Markham branded publicly available donation bins that are licensed through the City of Markham. And they also have a curbside textile ban that accompanies that program. So there's a wide range of different textile diversion programs that we could implement. I also spoke to different collaborative groups. So on something like the Ontario Textile Diversion Collaborative, which is a multi-stakeholder group consisting of academic researchers, municipalities, charitable collection agencies, that really work in this textile collection industry. And that's the same with the National Association for Charitable Textile Recycling. There was an internal working group that was sent early versions of this, the Town of Ajax program, who provided their input to the development of this program. Based on all of that consultation, both external and internal, there were some key considerations that came up through that consultation. Number one was that the region of Durham is currently undertaking their long-term waste management plan. Essentially, the region is at the second from the right little action icon there, where they are now developing the draft plan with consultation of the public and stakeholders. So the municipal consultation group is starting very soon, and Town of Ajax staff, including myself, are a part of that consultation group. So it's important to note that any textile program Ajax runs and manages will be in alignment with the release of this management plan, the long-term waste management plan that is expected in 2022. It will remain consistent so that messaging across the region is consistent, and that our internal Ajax diversion program can be adaptively managed if we need to make any changes when this plan is released. One of the considerations that came up is that most people, including myself at the time, aren't really aware where our clothing donations and textile donations end up. A lot of the time, it's kind of a convenience factor where someone might drop off a donation at a facility, or possibly a donation bin that's located across the Town of Ajax, but we don't really know where those donations are going. So this breaks it down at a very high level. If those donations are going to a charitable organization like Diabetes Canada or Salvation Army, then approximately 25% of those items are being sold for reuse in local secondhand stores. You can see the other portion, so 40% of those items will be recycled locally or internationally, typically into products that they would shred the textiles and produce them into products like rags, or even insulation for car seats is a big recycle opportunity. Some of that clothing will be sent overseas and be sold for reuse there, with whatever is not sold ending up in landfills. And 5% of the donations are either unfit for resale, cannot be donated, cannot be recycled locally or internationally, and end up straight in the landfill. So knowing that, we know that textiles, even donated textiles, are ending up in landfill, we want to really promote the 5 R's. And the 5 R's is also something that the region's long-term waste management plan will focus on communicating. So this is a little different than the 3 R's we learned about as kids in school. And it really is, the 5 R's are required if we want to live a zero waste lifestyle. So I've kind of put them here in a pyramid because you really do work down a hierarchy of the 5 R's. You want to start at the top and work your way to the bottom if needed. So the first R is rethink, and that's really where you're going to eliminate unnecessary purchases, limit necessary purchases, or switch to eco-friendly alternatives. The next would be reduce. You really want to limit the waste that you produce. And you can do this by a lot of different ways when we're talking about textiles, and anything from caring for your items properly, repairing items that may have a hole or lost a button, or even buying higher quality clothing to begin with. Then we'll move down to reuse, where you want to, when we're talking about textiles, you want to purchase secondhand clothing or consider clothing rentals if possible. We'll then move to recycle, where you want to donate your clothing or sell or swap that clothing online or through dedicated apps. And lastly, you want to recover. So that means you're going to utilize the waste to recover any resources possible. And when we're talking about textiles, that really means shredding into rags or non-woven products for insulation and emergency blankets, things like those. One of the considerations that came up when talking to every single municipality that was consulted was something known as ghost bins. These are typically operated, almost exclusively operated by for-profit organizations. So these are organizations that are collecting textiles and not reselling them or donating them. They are typically shipping all of these items overseas for a profit. They often look like this picture here. They're constructed of very cheap materials like plywood. They're not built to any level of safety standards. So you can see the bin to the left here doesn't have a safety door on the donation hole. It has an external lock. It's just a small padlock, whereas a lot of the bins that are up to safety standards have an internal locking mechanism. They're typically placed on vacant land without the owner's consent. So you might see this in an old field, an old ag field that's no longer operated, at the edge of large parking lots, places like that. And these ghost bins are typically hotspots for illegal dumping. Across municipalities in Ontario, most of the complaints about large illegal dumping at bins are associated with these ghost bins. So every municipality that was consulted emphasized the importance of addressing illegal bins within the community. Removing these will increase diversion rates, because we know that if they're going into proper bins run by charitable organizations, we know that the diversion rates from landfill are higher, and they'll decrease the amount of complaints coming into bylaw services. Now, Town of Ajax, within our Clean Community bylaw, does have a section that speaks specifically to donation bins. And in comparison to other municipalities in Southern Ontario, our donation bin bylaw is actually very strong. So it states that no person shall place or cause to be placed any donation bin on a property without the permission of that property owner. It also says that no bin shall be placed on Town of Ajax property, whether it's at side of a highway, a park, or a property owned by the town. And no owner shall place a donation bin on any property without first having applied to a site plan amendment pursuant to the Planning Act. And lastly, and most importantly, that legally stored donation bins must be maintained in a tidy condition and emptied as often as necessary to avoid overflow. One of the considerations also when talking to external stakeholders is that there are a lot of different collection agencies out there. These agencies collect textiles and use the profits to support and fund their mandates. And they can be driven by both for-profit organizations and nonprofit organizations. And whether they're for-profit or nonprofit, there are specific channels that these textiles are collected in. I think most of us think of the donation bins that we see as one of the only channels, but actually there's a lot of channels and collection points for these textiles. And here's a comprehensive list of them here. So donation bins being obviously very visible and spread throughout the region of Durham, not just the town of Ajax, are probably the most well-known. There's direct drop-off locations at thrift and retail locations. Some municipalities offer curbside collection. Some have piloted that program but never implemented them fully. There's residential door collection. So that's where a homeowner can schedule a pickup right at their door. There's one-time events that are drives or collection events. We have partnered with the region in the past to host a drive as part of our reuse days. And a lot of retailers are now doing retail returns where you can bring back their branded clothing wherever you purchase that item, and they will collect it from you. And lastly, one of the key considerations is to always remember that we may know a couple charitable collection agencies that are more visible than others, but there are several practicing and collecting throughout town of Ajax, across Durham region and across the province. And this is a fairly comprehensive list here. Most of these organizations are collecting within the town of Ajax already. They are part of the National Association for Charitable Textile Recycling. You may notice some larger names there, but there's a lot of smaller ones as well that collect and depend on those collections for their mandate. So taking into account all of those key considerations and the consultation that was completed, we are proposing a five-phased implementation plan for a textile diversion program through the town. And this is to remain consistent. We have a 5-phased implementation plan for our single-use plastics ban. So that's why I've chosen to go forward with a phased approach. It will also help us adaptively manage the program and to break it out into manageable pieces. So you can see the phases identified here. They are expanded on a bit more in a bit more detail in the report. But phase 1, which will be completed by this fall, is to endorse the council charter that is provided as an attachment to the report today. Develop and launch a dedicated textile diversion program webpage that really will help to educate the community and have strategic communications that will help promote those 5 Rs that I discussed earlier. Our hope is to launch this before October 2021 as part of Waste Reduction Week. One of the days during Waste Reduction Week in October is focused on textiles. As part of the launch of that website, we will want to undertake both a public survey for our residents as well as our staff to learn what barriers might exist as to why and how we might increase people's diversion rates voluntarily. Phase 2, we'll have to assess the donation bin standards in the Clean Community bylaw to see if they need updating. As mentioned, our bylaw on donation bins is very strong. We want to educate the public and staff on identifying and reporting those illegal bins for removal. Although they do garner a lot of complaints through bylaw due to illegal dumping, there is also a public safety aspect to them, that they don't have the safety standards in place. Some of you may remember a couple years ago that some donation bins within the city of Toronto actually caused some harm to members of the public. So we want to make sure that we're removing those for public safety concerns as well. But we know that there may be a cost associated with say operations staff going out to collect and remove those illegal bins, and we'd have to figure out the feasibility of, well, what would we do with the items that had already been donated? Town of Ajax does not run our own residential waste collection. A municipality like Markham, who does run all of their waste collection, typically has waste staff sort through the donated items at those illegal locations to see what can be donated to a proper collection point. That being said, Ajax does not have dedicated waste staff like Markham does. So we'd have to look at the feasibility of doing that with town staff. In the third phase, we want to complete a scan of all of the existing publicly available collection locations within Ajax and promote them on the website. And also do a scan for all of the available household pickup options and promote to our residents how they can schedule those on our dedicated website. I will mention I did do a quick scan within the area of Town Hall, and within a kilometer of Ajax Town Hall, we have 11 collection points, a mix of collection sites, like retail thrift stores, as well as donation bins. So there may be areas of Ajax that aren't as well served as the area around Town Hall, but for proximity to Town Hall, there is more than enough locations that could handle the textile collection for the town. Phase 4 would focus on investigating the feasibility of initiating a licensing program for charitable textile donation. This would allow those organizations to operate within the town of Ajax, whether it's on private property or if we want to expand it to pilot locations on town of Ajax property, say at one of our facilities. This is typically what municipalities do to ensure that any of the collection agencies operating within their municipality are licensed or permitted. And that allows us to have contact information for those organizations so that if there is an issue, it can be dealt with quickly. We want to, at this point, assuming that the long-term waste management plan from the region of Durham is released, we want to make sure that any information within that plan that is related to textiles or textile diversion, we want to ensure that our program is in alignment with that plan. And before fall of 2022, this is when we will report back to council on the implementation progress of this program. Now, phase 5, this is very similar to phase 5 in the single-use plastics ban, knowing that there will be ongoing items that need to be implemented. So we want to always continue to improve internal waste diversion. We want to improve our compliance of internal policies and external policies that are related to waste management. We will participate in related consultations held by other levels of government. So that would include the consultation being completed for the Durham's long-term waste management plan, as well as any provincial or federal consultation that may happen in the near future based on textile diversion. And we want to continue to encourage and educate residents, businesses, stakeholders, and community partners to increase their textile diversion rates. So in conclusion, we want to provide residents and staff with more opportunity through education and communication to divert their textiles from landfill. And this will increase diversion rates within the community while supporting charitable organizations. Ongoing education and engagement will be vital to approving this, especially as it's related to the 5 Rs. And Town of Ajax will continue to exemplify strong leadership in environmental sustainability by educating our staff on what they can do with textiles that they use in their personal lives. Lastly, I wanted to end on this quote by Tawny Collin, who's really a national leader in textile collection. She works for the Salvation Army and has really piloted the industry and has been involved in it in a long time. And her advice is to grow the textile waste diversion industry. You can help the environment, help our economy, and help our communities. A triple net bottom line like no other in the waste industry, a win for all. And with that, thank you for your time, and I am happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Cameron. I don't know if I missed any of my council colleagues' hands, but Mayor Collier was up first, and now I have Regional Councillor Dice after. Then Mayor? Floor is yours.
I'm muting. Thank you, and thank you for the presentation. I actually met with one of these companies back in 2019, I think it was, and I did provide the whatever they gave me, the presentation, but nothing came of it. But while you were giving your presentation, I went to one of the groups that I'll say the name, it was Diabetes Canada, since you mentioned it during your presentation. And I just looked at the bin locator, and they have 5 in Ajax, and that was actually the company who I met with, which looked like one of the biggest. They seemed reputable. So I just wonder, I'm not one to really want to reinvent the wheel. So I'm wondering why we're going to go through this whole process. I understand cleaning up the derelict bins and the unauthorized ones and getting rid of those, of course, no problem. But I'm not understanding the whole 5-step rollout for something that I think is already being done by a number of different companies, and we could just let them do it just in a more organized way. Could you speak to that, please?
Yes, through the chair to Mayor Collier. I agree with you. I believe there are a lot of agencies already working within town of Ajax and across the region. There's a lot of opportunities to expand locations. I don't necessarily believe that we need to pilot any locations on town of Ajax owned property. If I know some municipalities have donation bins at some of their facilities. The only reason I may see that might be necessary is if we have a location in town of Ajax that is very underserved by these collection points. As of right now, I don't know if we have an area like that, but I believe what my focus will be is to do the communications and outreach prior to October of this year to promote all of the existing opportunities for collection and all of the existing sites for collection across the town. So it really is a practice in improving our communications, housing that all in one location. We currently do not have any information on our website about textile diversion. And in fact, the region of Durham has one sentence about textile diversion on their website. So I think we can do a much better job within the town of Ajax of promoting that, as well as using that information to promote it across the region and have a consistent approach across the region of Durham.
Well, to that, I agree. I think we can definitely do a better job of that. And this hasn't brought up at the region a few times, and it hasn't really gone anywhere, which I think is because the region can't really authorize locations in any of our municipalities.
Correct.
So they've left that to municipalities. The group I met with, the bins that they showed that were located in other municipalities, I think Markham was one, were larger. They were very clearly identified who they were, and they weren't junky looking, and they did want to put them on town property like our community centers. I think the reason was a lot less chance of just plain dumping, because I think that is a big problem when you have these things in these sort of out of the way areas. People just dump their stuff and walk away. So having it at our community centers, I think that deters a lot of that, because they are frequented quite a bit. There's always people around and there's cameras. So I actually thought that was a good idea, rather than have them in these obscure kind of areas, just have central located that are maintained, that aren't bad looking, and have it focused. But that was just my opinion. Anyway, I'm glad to see this coming forward. I don't see this as a real problem, because I don't think a lot of textiles go into the garbage anyway. I think a lot of people do make use of these bins, but I do absolutely agree with the raising of the awareness. I don't want to see a whole lot of time spent on it, because I don't see it as a big problem. Thank you.
You're welcome, Mayor. Next, Regional Councillor Dies.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Richardson, for your presentation. It was very interesting to me. I did also meet with the same company the mayor spoke of, and found their presentation very interesting. And I do see a need for it. And maybe, like the mayor was saying, we don't get perhaps a lot of textiles that we can't find a use for, but we do get them, particularly now with certain large scale retailers who are selling what I call, throwaway clothes. So the young girls are going out for an evening, they buy a nice dress for a very, very cheap amount of money, and they throw it out afterwards because they know it can't be washed or ironed or anything like that. So in those circumstances, we have some issues here. And I think your whole discussion about education and communication is really very valuable and important. So when you talked about reducing purchasing and repairing clothes and donating to clothing shops, will this all be part of your education and communication piece?
Through the chair to Regional Councillor Dies, you're correct. It will all be part of the education piece, making sure to emphasize all of the 5 Rs. So, directing residents where they can get clothing repaired. There's apps and online services to rent clothing, not just tuxedos and dresses, but everyday clothing that if you're going to a special event, you can rent it for a day. There are apps for swapping and selling items, things like we know similar to Kijiji or the app Virage Sale, where you can sell used clothing or purchase used clothing. So that will all be part of the education to ensure that people are thinking about those early steps before they even get to the point of donating clothes that they no longer use.
Well, I think that's really important. I also think it's important to do a campaign on reading labels, because if you can't keep a garment, if you really like something and you can't keep it, it's throwaway. What's the point in buying it? And what is the cost really to residents when they have to pay for that at the region and when it goes to the incinerator? And there's all kinds of issues there. And just the other issue too with the retailers, I mean, there are many not-for-profits. You will get a call for a residential pickup from a not-for-profit and they take it to a major retailer in the area. And I think that's good for people to know, because they don't always make that association. And it's important because it not only supports a not-for-profit, but allows me to go and buy something secondhand and reuse it again. So I think that's really important too, to make those connections and really promote those connections within the community. I think the textile waste industry is an issue. And, you know, again, I do support having, I don't think we need them everywhere, but having them maybe at a recreation site, that kind of thing, for those textiles that you can't give away to be worn a second time. So even though I give away all my clothes, I know sometimes there are things that people aren't going to buy. It's a rag, and then what happens to that? And I hate throwing it into the incinerator. So I think those are all kinds of things I'd like to see in the education plan, the communication and plan, and I hope you take it into consideration at the time. But I appreciate the report.
Through the chair, thank you, Regional Councillor Dyes. I will take all of that into consideration, and even educating people on the fact that damaged clothing, say a zipper's been ripped off, a hole has been ripped in it, those can be donated to these locations because they get shredded for reuse as different things. So it doesn't always have to be high quality clothing that's in perfect condition. They obviously don't want any dirty or wet clothing, but something with a hole on it can be diverted from landfill because it will be shredded for other uses. So we need to make people aware of that and utilize, whether it's a few locations at one of our facilities where people can donate, or even post-COVID hosting more one-off events where we host large drives, whether it's for staff or members of the community, to bring in their textiles that they want to donate. And those are easy to implement. We can partner with one of those collection agencies to run a day or two of collection at a special location. So we will take all of that into account.
Thank you. Those are great ideas.
Thank you, Cameron. Thank you, Regional Councillor Dyes. The only other speaker I have is Councillor Bauer, and just to let you know that our break is directly in your hands right now. So the longer you take, the longer you take your break. So,
all right, I'll just flip through my pages of questions then.
Just before you start, did Councillor Tyler Moore want to speak after? Okay, he's not responsible for the break. Okay, it's yours. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Richardson. What a great presentation. Very interesting. I learned a lot of things, and I agree with pretty much, I think education and awareness is mentioned at least in the first 3 phases and in the 5th one. But I think I agree with Regional Councillor Dyes on all of her comments. That it really is about awareness and education. I think the pandemic has played a part in this as well, because many of us are at home and many families or residents have been cleaning out their cupboards, cleaning out their homes, looking at gathering their things that maybe they don't need or want anymore. And that's sort of increased the question of where do I bring these things? What do I do with them? Where can I donate them? And that's sort of how I started thinking about it, as well as your comment regarding the rental of clothes. For example, when my daughter had her prom several years back, a handful of her friends were renting their dresses because you know, they only needed it for the evening, and those dresses can be quite costly. So I think it's a really smart move. So my question, I did have one about the ghost bins. When you were doing your research for this excellent report, did you see that the town has an issue with ghost bins?
Through the chair to Councillor Bauer, I have not heard of any real issues with ghost bins. They do pop up from time to time within the town of Ajax, but they really are only reported by members of the public when they become hotspots for illegal dumping. Otherwise, they're usually kept clean. They don't bother anybody. They're in kind of places that are tucked away from main sight lines. So they're not a major issue to people unless they become hotspots for dumping. But as I mentioned, there is a public safety aspect to it as well, because they're not built to any standard. I mean, any kid could easily knock off an external padlock and go into a bin and get stuck in there. So we want to ensure the safety of our residents. So we'll teach our operations staff, any of our staff that are out and about during the day, to identify these bins. They're quite easy to identify because they don't have very much information on them. There's never a number on them or anything like that. And our residents as well, so that they can report them to us for removal, because we want to ensure the safety of our residents. But as far as I know, Ajax does not have a major problem with them. In speaking to some of the municipalities during the consultation phase of my investigation, they had major problems with these bins. They would remove a bin and then the next day a bin would be there in its place. So major issues. And they've banned them, required any collection agency to have a license to operate within their municipality, because they're trying to tackle that.
Wow, very interesting. Thank you for that. And yeah, I love the idea of consolidating all of the information on one website, one page for us to handle and promote. And I thank you for this presentation. I think it was great. And I think council should remain or be a leader in this, and definitely endorse the council charter. Thank you for the presentation. Thanks, Chair. That's it. Quick enough for you?
Yes. Any other questions to the presenters? I see no hands. Okay, so do I get a mover for the recommendation of the reports? Regional Councillor Dies. Thank you very much. All those in favor? All in favor? Mayor in favor? None opposed? This motion carries. So, Clerk, do I need a mover to go into for the break, or no? I can just go in for the break.
Mr. Chair, if you like, you can do a motion to go into closed session and then we can take a break.
Okay, wonderful. So a motion for closed session. I see Regional Councillor Crawford. All in favor? All in favor? None opposed? This carries. We'll move in a closed.
Mr. Chair, we are live again.
Thank you very much. I'll start out by asking for a mover to adopt the recommendation of the report 7.3 as held in the closed session. I see Regional Councillor Lee. All those in favor? I see all hands.
Sorry, I couldn't quite hear you. Could you please repeat what you said?
Sorry, I have interrupted you. Why is Siri interrupting me?
It's okay, Siri.
Okay, sorry, Siri. Yes, and all that carries. Thank you. All right, we will move forward. Now, I need a motion or a mover to adjourn the meeting. I see Councillor Tyler Moran. All those in favor? Any opposed? I see none. Thank you very much all.